studies starting in kindergarten, and I am against this. You might ask, why in the world would a Black person speak against ethnic studies? Because not everything that sounds good is good. The definition of ethnic studies right there in the statute says that there is a connection between a person's race and their stratification. The bill tells kids of color that they are stuck in a caste system based on their race. It also tells kids, and I quote, that institutions chronically favor white people and disadvantage people of color. I'm sick of everyone denying the enormous progress we've made in this country, acting like it's 1930. We used to have a race-based system. We got rid of it, and now you're all trying to bring it back.
Okay, before I actually get into this actual story itself, let me give a shout out to the 1LVZ because he was the one that actually texted me and sent me the link to this video right here. There's actually more to it, but it cuts off right there because that's the part that they really wanted to focus on with what this woman said. Now, I've never heard of this individual before today. And after looking at her and like seeing what she said right here and pulling some stuff up from some stuff she said in the past. And when I say the past, I'm not even talking that far back. I'm talking about last summer, like around August. I can see what type of time she's on. And I realize every time they get a Black person to be a mouthpiece when they say things like this against something like what she's talking about, they always throw them on Fox News, as you can see right here. When I type this woman's name into the search bar, which for the news tab, her name is Kofi Montzka. And it says she's an attorney. She's a mother of 3. But every time someone says something like this, they always throw them on Fox News. Because one of the pictures that I did see was her sitting right next to Laura Ingraham. You know, Miss Shut Up and Dribble, that Laura Ingraham. So every time I see something like that, that means that they have to, they like, yes, we found our golden goose of the day, of the week, of the month, that we can trot out there and say how ridiculous something is. But it's best that we use them as a prop, because if we say it, then, you know, people gonna say that we're this and that and we're that. The thing is this, it don't matter how many of your prop shields you throw out there, you are still a dub S at the end of the day. You're not that shielded. Trust and believe. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the article coming from Reed Lyon. That way it goes into more detail about what she said and the response. The Minnesota legislature is considering a bill that will require all public school students to take ethnic studies, even kindergartners. Now, what I would like to see is I would like to read the bill. I would like to see what's inside the bill for this woman to make this claim. Because the way that she's talking, she sounds like she read it. And I would like to see what it is. Because I'm going to be honest, if she didn't read it and she only went off it based off because it said ethnic studies, then she looks like an even bigger fool than she looks like on this screen and how she sounded in that audio. Minnesota's K-12 population is rapidly becoming more diverse, but the classroom learning experience in our state does not reflect our student population. Representative Samantha Sensor-Mira of Minneapolis, the author of the bill, claimed in a statement on Friday, all students deserve to see themselves, their own cultures, communities, and histories within their education. If passed, HB 1502, which is sponsored by a slew of Democratic representatives, will go into effect in the 2025-2026 school year. Kofi, and that part right there is probably what they're even more mad about. Look at who's pushing the bill, the Democratic Party. We know that the Republicans would never do something like this. As a matter of fact, this would not pass in Florida as long as Ron DeSnowflake is governor. He would call it too woke. And if y'all hear the chimes in the background, that's the 1LVZ texting me some more stuff that I'm going to probably find a way to insert into this commentary. Kofi Montzka, a lawyer and mother, called Minnesota's measure oppressive and racist. The bill tells kids of color, now keep this in mind, she only referred to herself as a Black woman, and you probably heard her to say that because she said that quite a bit. She said kids of color. We know who they're talking about. And when I pulled up some other stuff about her, she kept saying people of color then. So we know what type of time she's on. Y'all know we don't use that POC term, that verbiage over here. But I'm just going off of what she said. The bill tells kids of color they are stuck in a caste system based on their race. She testified before the legislature on Tuesday. I'm sick of everyone denying the enormous progress we've made in this country, acting like it's 1930. I'd have to ask her, what enormous progress have we made? And when did you get over here? Because that name, Kofi, is very African. I'm not sure from which from which country, what nation, but it's definitely very African. Every Kofi that I've come across or heard or seen definitely has some African lineage. From where in the continent, I'm not sure. So my thing is this: when did she get over here? I bet you it wasn't around no 1930. As far as her ancestors go, I would like to know, when did she get over here? Is she first or second generation born? Because it's probably somewhere in that range. She's with her age, she might be first generation, which means her parents came over way after, probably after Jim Crow, or maybe right around the time of Jim Crow popping off, as far as the more modern version of it that time, because Jim Crow had been going on for way longer before then. She goes on to say, we used to have a race-based system. We got rid of it, and now you're all trying to bring it back. Did we? Did we really get rid of it? See, this is what Tariq calls the tether class. This is what Tariq be talking about when he says the tethers, and we have a lot of people who are part of the diaspora who falls into that category and they get mad. This is what we're talking about. Of course, not every non-FBA person or person who's immigrant will fall into that category. But when you have people that talk like this, that is your tether clash right there. And she falls right into that category just by what she's saying. She said trying to bring it back. My question is, when did it ever leave? That's the best question. See, the thing is, they got distracted by all the smoke and mirrors of everything of so-called progress that they don't realize in the small print, it's still very much there. Although Minnesota has yet to create comprehensive standards for K through 12 ethnic studies, those in California, where similar legislation passed in 2021, is revealing. Far from being an innocuous celebration of different cultures, ethnic studies classes are explicitly interested in quote-unquote social justice and require both students and teachers to view their own identities almost exclusively through the lens of race. This is why I want to read this bill even more now, because they could be embellishing this. You know how PC get. It also shows brazen preference for minorities. Now we're getting somewhere. Brazen preference for minorities. You mean the same brazen preference that white students got for so long? That's why a lot of them get upset when other groups of people get ahead of them, specifically black people. Take, for instance, the first principle of ethnic studies: cultivate empathy, community actualization, cultural perpetuity, self-worth, self-determination, and the holistic well-being of all participants, and especially Native peoples and Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I don't like that BIPOC. I never knew what that stood for until just now. I always saw it, but I never knew what it stood for. I knew the last one had to be POC though. But you know, they like to lump us into their, I'm keeping myself separate so we can take the B out and they can leave it with IPOC. In Minnesota, Senator Murrah defended her bill, saying her goal is to bridge cultural divides. I'm bringing this bill because I believe that division exists when we do not have the space to learn from each other, to confront and reckon with our histories, and to imagine new ways of being together. And ethnic studies do just that. But others see the bill as just stoking the flames. We are such a divided country right now, said Representative Pan Altendorf. It says a Red Wing, whatever that is. I don't know if that's a city or what. It says, I think more education is better, and I think everyone agrees with that. What we're against is the division, and the division that this causes. Notice that whenever people want to bring up something about learning about other cultures other than white history, because let's be real with ourselves here, then it's causing division. That's when they want to say, oh, you're being divisive. We're not being divisive. We're just telling it like it is. This is the nation we live in. They want to act like they are in La La Land. Remember, I keep telling y'all, PC has the luxury to live in La La Land. Black people, we don't have that luxury. We have to live in reality. We can't have our heads up in the clouds like they do. They have that luxury because the system benefits them the most. And they hate hearing that too. And they know that it does. They love that it benefits them the most, but they hate hearing that it does benefit them the most. It's the weirdest thing. Montzka later told Fox News she thought the content of the bill was quote unquote disgusting and groups kids and pits them against each other. How would you know? And see, this is the thing right here. When people say stuff like that, you can only imagine what they're telling their kids at home about other kids. Again, the so-called divide that PC loves to say there's a division, that starts at home. We always say that we don't believe, a lot of times you can say that a child is not born a certain way. They're raised and ingrained into that culture, or they're raised a certain way to think a certain way. And that starts at home. So if anyone wants to talk about divide and division, that divide and division starts when they're at home before they even leave the house to go to school or wherever it is that they're going. That's taught at home. My thing is this, if they feel so bad about it, then why don't they just homeschool their children? Then you can teach them whatever you want. But the thing is, many of their asses can't afford it. As I think I told y'all a story about this a while back, but I'll tell it right here. And this is a story that my mother told me years ago, and it made me laugh when she told me it. Because my mother, she was born in South Carolina, and, she was born in, back during when Jim Crow was still Jim Crow. And she was around going into schools when it was still segregation. Like, they had black schools, white schools. She ended up, I think she was one of the first kids as a child to go to a school when they were starting to do the integration thing. She said it was so many white parents that pulled their kids out of school that like it almost looked like a ghost town after a while. And then they tried to put them into these private schools. Days, maybe a week or so later, all those parents that pulled their kids out of the schools because only a couple of black kids was going there, including herself, came back to that school with their kids and re-enrolled them. Why? Because their broke asses couldn't afford private school. So they had to they had to bite the bullet and just deal with it. And then, of course, as time went on, the schools around the nation became desegregated. Those who were segregated became desegregated. I thought that was the funniest story that she ever told me. And that's one of the stories that will always stick with me whenever I have to talk about a topic such as this. So when they keep saying that there's a division or they're bringing a divide, look at how a lot of schools in black neighborhoods look, and look at how schools in white neighborhoods look. That right there can be seen as a divide, but they're not going to call that out. But they'll get on their soapbox each and every day and say how bad these black kids are. They'll say that all day, every day. But then when you look at the lack of resources a lot of these schools have, that could be seen as a divide right there. Why didn't Kofi Montzka talk about that? But she's worried about what's in this bill. Like I said, I still want to see what this bill is. It's called the HB 1502 bill. And they said that it has yet to be voted on in the House. I had paused the video briefly right quick if I could see if I could find a link to see if I could pull the bill up. But when I pulled it up, it was nothing there. It's just that it's in the beginning stages of it. So unfortunately, it's not public yet where I can go and read it, which makes me wonder how in the world she got it. But they say she's an attorney. So that may be how she was able to retrieve it. Now, with that being said, I'm going to go into the stuff that the 1LVZ sent me because he sent it to me through a text. One of the things that he sent me was a conversation that he had with this Kofi Montzka person because he found her on Facebook. And in case y'all don't know, the 1LVZ is one of those people that will call. Like, he will make a call to a place if a place needs to be called. This is the same guy that went up to the ESPN Center a couple years ago. I forgot what it was about. And he had recorded it and everything. He's called jobs, he's called stations, he's called everyone, recorded it and put it on there. He's that person that will do that. But he reached out to this Kofi Montzka person on Facebook and sent her a text. Now, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I'm just going to read the first part of it because the 1LVZ literally was grilling her like the rest of the text to the point where she wasn't even responding to him anymore. So I'm only going to read the first page. He said, "It is very easy to have an African who's not from American lineage married to a white man talking about how ethnic studies won't benefit black kids. You are not our spokesperson." She replies back with, "I'm not African. I'll say what I please and I'll marry who I please." Now, she's lying right there. Again, that name, Kofi Montzka. That's why I said she's probably first generation born. So she was probably born in America, but she has African lineage because that name, Kofi, anyone who has that name most likely has African lineage. I'm just saying. She also replied with, "It'd be nice if people refuted the substance of what I said instead of irrelevant matters." And then he said the lying African who, and I can't see the rest because it's an arrow blocking it. And the rest of it was with him just practically grilling her the rest of the way to the point where the conversation just ended after like 3 pages of text. But then he sent me something else just recently. And that's why I said when you heard the dinging of my phone, from the Star Tribune that's dated May 21st, 2019. So we're going back a couple of years. It says, growing up poor and black, Kofi Montzka considered herself a liberal. Now I want y'all to listen to this because her little story that you're about to hear lines up with another individual that we talk about quite often on this channel. But after deeper consideration in college, she concluded that the Republican Party's message was better for low-income people and racial minorities. Instead of telling those groups that they're smart and equal, she said, liberals send the message that there's some barrier. So no matter how hard you try, there's nothing you can do. That message is incredibly destructive and terrible. Now, an attorney living in Shoreview, Montzka was among a small group of African Americans and a mostly white crowd that came to the Hilton, Minneapolis on Saturday night to hear a speech by a conservative commentator and activist, Candace Owens. That's who I was referring to. I didn't know they was going to mention her in the article, but that's who I was talking about. Calling for black people to leave the Democratic Party, and of course they're talking about Blexit. In a city with a strong Democratic lean and some of the nation's largest gaps in income and education between whites and blacks, Owens opened a window into the frustration of black conservatives. As Democrats field a record number of candidates in the presidential primary, Owens and some African American advocates are challenging whether the party deserves the black vote. Now, my question is, where's that Blexit now? When's the last time we heard about Blexit? Didn't that get shut down because of like copyright or something like that? Because I believe that Blexit was for another organization, but Candace took it and turned it into whatever it is. Because Candace don't talk about Blexit no more. She don't. I had to pause right quick to go type Blexit into Google, and apparently that Blexit website is still active, and so is their Twitter account. And they just tweet, stuff every now and then. And interestingly enough, when I went onto their page, I found the video from the audio y'all heard at the beginning of her talking about this situation right here. I can't take none of these individuals seriously. I can't. But she, good luck to her and her crusade. If I have any subscribers that live out in Minnesota, particularly, in Minneapolis, maybe y'all can give me some more information about this situation. Because again, the bill is not on a public platform as of yet, where I can go and read it for myself and get an idea of what kind of gripe she has. But based on the stuff that I read and what conversation the 1LVZ had with her and sent to me, plus that last article that I just read from 2019, I can see she's definitely on the grifting side of the game.